Digital censorship may be the most serious problem we face as a country today. It's certainly one of the most serious problems because it strikes right at the heart not only of civil liberties, but also of democracy. It intercepts, it blocks, it shadow bans, it restricts our basic ability to speak, to say our piece, to articulate our point of view. But how does this digital restriction work? How does it work kind of on the inside? I want to talk about Facebook here, and I got a couple of strikes on my Facebook. I'm not banned or anything, but the point of these strikes is that they mark your post as being false or missing context. The basic idea is they're alerting people that you're spreading, in their words, misinformation. But is it misinformation? And who decides if it's misinformation? And what does misinformation in this context really mean? Now, the way that Facebook works is that they act as if they're not making the decision directly, or at least they're making the decision based upon somebody else's decision, these so-called fact-checking sites that they apparently rely on. I'm not quite sure if Facebook is using the fact-checking sites as a pretext, or if they really do say, oh, the fact-checking site says so, therefore, we're going to go along with that. And if the fact-checking site is putting out misinformation themselves, then Facebook is being duped. Now, I mentioned before on this podcast that some time ago, this is a few months ago now, I had posted about Biden. Biden merely saying what he said in the debate, Antifa is merely an idea. Ding! Facebook, missing context. And I'm thinking, what context? I mean, that's all that Biden said about it in the debate. It's not that Biden made a lengthy statement. I deceptively edited it to make it seem that he said something different than he did. That's what he said. I quoted him, and literally the quote itself was flagged for missing context. And I think this is kind of a classic example, where there are two recent examples. They ding me for saying that Kamala Harris is a descendant of slaveholders. Wow. Now, this is a story that actually I broke. I wasn't the only one who covered it, but I put it out there. I found Kamala Harris's dad, Donald Harris, who was talking about how he was descended from one of Jamaica's largest slave owners, Hamilton Brown. I also found the genealogy, the family tree that showed the direct line of descent from Kamala Harris through Donald Harris, through a free woman of color named Christiana Brown, and then Christiana Brown on through the son of the slaveholder Hamilton Brown. Hamilton Brown, by the way, had more than 5 plantations and more than 200 slaves. So this is a fact. And it's a fact that was initially disputed. When I first put it out, there were a couple of people, Nicole Hannah-Jones, the kind of lead architect of the 1619 Project. She didn't dispute the genealogy. She tried to imply that I was missing the fact that there had been rape on the plantation, and so she contested that aspect of what I said. But when I showed that the slave owner's son had married a free woman of color, this was not a product of rape on the plantation. Nicole Hannah-Jones deleted her tweet, and so did another historian, Kevin Levin, who said basically, I'm sorry, I got it wrong, Dinesh is right. So the bottom line of it is these are facts. Now, I kind of looked up what the fact-checking sites are saying about Kamala Harris. So here is Snopes. And interestingly, when you read the Snopes account, it basically corroborates my account. Yes, Snopes realizes that Kamala Harris is descended from Hamilton Brown. They trace the lineage the same way I did. And then at the end, they say this, which is kind of the giveaway. They go, even if it is the case that the Harris family, by way of Christiana Brown, are descendants of Hamilton Brown, those who seek to attack or undermine Senator Harris for the wrongdoing of a man who died almost 200 years ago should first get a better understanding of the often complicated, traumatic histories of black families in the United States. So their point is, it may be true, but don't say it because you're missing what blacks have gone through in the United States. My point is that Kamala Harris is not one of those blacks. That Kamala Harris did not go through the sort of American slavery experience. Her father was an immigrant from Jamaica, and he is descended from slaveholders by his own admission. So this is not a misstatement of fact by me. In fact, what Snopes is really doing is corroborating the fact while expressing distress that the facts are as they are. I'm sure that they would rather Kamala Harris didn't have this lineage. And then we turn to PolitiFact, looking at claims that Kamala Harris is a descendant of a slave owner. And let me read. Records in online genealogy archives suggest Harris's great-great-great-grandfather was a slaveholder. There you go. And then they go on. They talk about the article that Donald Harris, Kamala's father, published in a Jamaican magazine listing his lineage. They talk about looking up a genealogy site called Family Search, a reliable site, and they go according to the family tree, Hamilton Brown Jr., this is the son of this slaveholder, had a son named Hamilton Brown, who with a woman named Jessie and Prince had a daughter named Christiana Brown. Christiana Brown and Joseph Alexander Harris had a son named Oscar Joseph Harris. Oscar Joseph Harris and Beryl Finnegan had Donald Harris. And Donald Harris married Shamala Gopalan, and the couple had Kamala Harris. And there it is. So what I'm getting at here is that, at the end, after providing all this documentation, here's PolitiFact. They conclude, they go, in the end, we don't have enough documentation. In other words, what they're waiting for is some additional documentation. Think about the documentation we do have. We have genealogy. We have Kamala's dad's own account, undisputed. And that's not enough. So bottom line of it is, what Facebook really is doing here is either relying upon a deception or promoting a deception themselves. So this is very, very bad on Facebook's part. I now want to turn to Facebook's second example. They accuse me of saying that AOC was not actually in danger during the Capitol riots. And Facebook, again, relying on fact-checking sites, says, or apparently relying on fact, says that's lacking context or not true. But it is true. AOC was in her office, and by her own account, the only other person to enter her office was a Capitol Hill policeman. She was not, in fact, in danger. At one point on January 6th, AOC went to a different building and supposedly hid in someone else's office, but no Trump supporter, no protester, no rioter got into that building or came near that office either. Representative Mack, who was right next door to AOC, says, I was there. My office is right next door. No, nobody got in. So the bottom line of it is any danger that AOC felt, or any danger that AOC was in, was only in her head. So I'm not denying that she felt afraid. I'm denying, or I raised the question of whether she was in fact in any real danger, and clearly she wasn't. Now, the point I want to make here with regard to Facebook is this, and that is that in all these situations, Facebook acts like they're correcting misinformation. But in fact, they're not. If I went on Facebook tomorrow and I posted that 2 + 2 is 5, they wouldn't ding me. If I went on there and posted that Napoleon won the Battle of Waterloo, they wouldn't ding me. Why? Because they don't actually care about misinformation. Those would be misinformation. But you notice that they're dinging me on things that matter to them, the things that matter to the left's ideological narrative. Why pick Kamala Harris? Because after all, Kamala Harris's identity politics depends on the idea that she's sort of this multiple victim. And particularly she's descended from slaves. So if she's descended from slave owners, that disrupts the narrative. That's why Facebook cares about it. That's why they want to sort of make sure that the narrative is sustained. AOC put out this dramatic account, January 6th, I was hiding for my life. I peered through the door, this, that. So Facebook wants to support this narrative, even though the narrative was based upon, at the very least, false fears. But because I'm calling out those fears as being factually false, factually based upon no genuine danger, ding, lacking context, missing information. And the latest thing with Facebook is this business about taking down Laura Trump's interview with Trump. Now, this is an escalation, because it's one thing to say, Trump poses a clear and present danger, his comments about the election. We're not going to allow those comments. That is level number one. Level number two is we're going to ban Trump. We're going to ban Trump permanently because presumably not only has he made offenses, we have to prevent against future offenses. So he's permanently banned. Level 3, and even further escalation, is that a man who is clearly newsworthy, who is the de facto leader of the Republican Party, does a media interview which is then posted, and that is taken down. So this is not actually Trump posting himself, but somebody else posting about Trump, and they won't allow that either. So this is, I think, a terrifying regime of censorship. I mean, it's almost as if when I look at this, it's almost like if we look back, we say we had a 44th president, we have a 46th president, but there was really no one in between. Why? Because as far as Facebook and some of these sites are concerned, Trump has been communist style erased from history.